Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 10 of WVD Monthly. I'm your host, Andy Whiteside. I got Bill Sutton, Director of Services at XenTegra with me. Bill, it's our third podcast of the day. You and I. Bill, you there? Rob, can you hear him?
Something like that.
I can hear you.
About that. Yep, something like that.
So third one of the day. So we're starting to, it's been a long day. However, we have Rob Shaw with us from Microsoft. Rob, how's it going?
It's going good. Living the dream.
We were just looking at the updates for May 2021, which this is what we're going to cover today. And well, there's
Sure.
a ton of them. Some of them you said we'd already talked about some, and we'll just highlight that. But you guys have been busy over there.
Yeah. Some of them are kind of things that have been in flight for a while. Some things that we've talked about on previous podcasts. But they had so many. They changed the name.
Yeah. Well, let's start with that. So help our listeners understand what Microsoft AVD really means, both from a control plane as well as from an infrastructure hosting platform.
Yeah. So, if you go back to the beginnings of early days of WVD and before that RDMI and a couple other names, for about a 2-week window, I think we were actually Azure Virtual Desktop. And I think, to be more holistic, I think, it made sense to change it to an Azure Virtual Desktop. And, some of the components that are Azure only, I think it made sense. So that helped to eliminate maybe some confusion, and of course create some new confusion. It's amazing how fast people have adopted the name, which has been kind of surprising to me.
We started talking about it. I started talking about it that day only because other people on my team pointed it out, and then I was telling other people, and they seemed so. What's your take on the name change? Does it make it clear as to what it is?
I think for a little while it'll be a little confusing for customers, but only if they already were talking about a WVD project, for example. And I think it's potentially more embracive of our partners as well. With whether we're doing a native AVD deployment, or whether it's with Citrix or VMware or somebody else. So. Certainly, and since we, could potentially be delivering a Linux OS, it might not even be Windows. So,
well, that makes a ton of sense. If you throw the Linux thing into the mix, that makes a ton of sense. And I agree with you. The Azure Virtual Desktop name gives you a chance to really talk about hosting those other or working with those other brokering solutions to get to Azure. That really does enable a reboot of that conversation too.
Yeah, I think so.
I have a question for you, and you probably saw me just search for this real quick, but Azure Stack Hub as a on-premises extension of Azure and where that ties into AVD, do you know anything about that? Is that something that you talk to people about?
I don't know where that is today. In the beginnings of WVD, it was immediately put kind of into a super secret private preview. And it's something that I heard come up, not necessarily recently, but mostly in government sectors where they really need those dedicated, isolated type environments. I never saw it leave a private preview, that kind of super secret private preview, to see it move. I think it's still a plan to try and get it into Azure Stack Hub, but I haven't seen him. Perhaps we should plan on providing an update to this, in the forum.
Yeah, I would love to learn more about that. I think there are still needs for on-premises, and for the most part, people moving to Azure need to, post it up in your data centers anyway.
Yeah,
those edge use cases, not to be a pun on the word, still probably apply here and there. And I want to learn more about it.
Yeah, it's certainly very, somewhat fairly isolated, because the hardware has to be specific hardware. It's effectively like you're running Azure in an on-prem environment. You're still kind of in an Azure consumption model. So the value of potentially delivering WVD running a virtual desktop, near perhaps where the users are, either from a security perspective or a latency perspective. There certainly could be a pretty good argument that could be made for that.
Well, for now, let's just stick to where most people need to be, which is Windows 10 desktop running in Azure, multi-session, single session, and brokered too by either Microsoft or one of its partners. And let's talk about the first thing on the list here, which is smart card authentication.
Yep. Yeah. So this is something that especially, again, since we mentioned Fed just a minute ago, that's something that comes up very strongly in the federal opportunities where they're leveraging smart card various types. We've had kind of this ability for a while where you could stand up a KDC proxy to proxy Kerberos connectivity. I would say this is kind of the WVD PG group kind of validating this, making it easier for you to kind of stand it up and providing documentation to get it done.
Yeah. So Rob, we got to have a drinking game. Every time you say WVD, you got to take a drink.
Yeah, man. It's going to be a long time.
Yeah, I bet so. Okay. Bill, as we go through these, feel free to chime in on any that you'd want further clarification on, including that one.
I will.
Okay. Web client now supports file transfer.
Yeah, this one it came out of left field. I didn't even know this was on the horizon. So basically in your browser window, being able to search for a virtual drive and basically be able to kind of connect and deliver file transfer. I hadn't heard it was coming and was kind of surprised to see it in the main notes.
Is this file transfer in and out of the virtual image itself or through OneDrive?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, in and out of the virtual machine. So something you could pretty much do, basically in in a full desktop session, and now being able to do it in a web client session.
Okay. Oh, I got it. So the web client enables the file transfer between the host or the virtual session and the endpoint.
Exactly. Yep.
Go ahead, Bill.
That's exactly what I was going to say. This is to transfer files from the endpoint, between the endpoint and the VDI or the AVD session.
And I guess, Rob, that just requires some modern day browser that's HTML5 capable.
Right, and you'll see a couple down that we're dropping support for IE as a web client, right? And that might be interrelated. Now that doesn't mean that you can't still publish IE or have IE in a virtual machine that you're delivering access to. It just means you can't use IE to connect as a web client in the future. So I just figured I'd kind of blend that together, here.
Yeah, it makes sense. All right, this next one, I think we've talked about it, but it looks like there's some evolution of it, the Start VM on Connect support updates.
Yeah, we were really only able to do that for personal VMs in the initial phase of it. I actually thought this was going to be pushed a little bit further, but evidently they were able to kind of pull together some things a little faster. So now, if I do a pool assignment, meaning I log in, and at login I get assigned to a VM that wasn't previously already assigned to me, that now we can say, oh, well, we've shut off all the VMs. We'll go ahead and start a VM up for you, right? And if it was one that you basically disconnected and it went, kind of into a reserved state, that when you log back in, that you'll be able to get that same VM.
My favorite thing about what you just talked about was the use of the word personal. I've forever used persistent, and for a technical guy that makes sense. But the idea that that's really your personal VM. I may be late to the game on that one, but that's a great way to explain what that type of workload is.
I think for a lot of us that had been around the VDI world for a while, I think we initially saw that as kind of a quandary. Like, well, no, it's a persistent assignment, and the PG from the very beginning of, well, then WVD, now have kind of always had that assignment idea that it was a personally assigned VM, which, you know, the rest of the industry probably does call it more of a persistent assignment, but same idea.
Well, and I guess us old guys, we have the legacy idea of this personalization disk attachment. So we were kind of reserving that one for that use case.
Yeah, that's possibly true.
Yeah. All right, this next one may not matter much in the U.S., but updates, improvements on the latency around UAE, United Arab Immigrants, or Emirates region. Probably not much to say there, other than the fact that you guys just keep trying to keep it getting better.
Yeah. Where we already had control planes, we've been doing the Azure front door connection to really provide latency improvements, and this is, you know, again, just expanding and, you know, pushing that out to new regions that we weren't already in.
Yeah. Next one is ending Internet Explorer 11 support. I think I've talked about IE more today than I have in a really long time on various podcasts, but it goes back to what you're talking about a while ago, just the ability to leverage maybe the Chromium engine that's now part of Edge and other browsers that allow you to really know where to focus.
Yeah, there were development efforts that were required to be able to, you know, maintain the capabilities of using IE as a connection method to Azure Virtual Desktop. Thank you, Andy and Bill. Yeah, that and again, even things like if anybody's using FS Logics, like the Java control piece, in which case you'd have to use, you know, IE to be able to leverage that for web pages. That'll still function. It just means you just can't use IE as a browser to connect to AVD.
Yeah. Okay. Next one is Microsoft Endpoint Manager Public Preview.
Yeah. So formerly known as Intune. MEM is an ability to be able to manage the devices such as System Center, but MEM, or formerly Intune, was more of an Azure-based vehicle for doing that. We've been able to do single one-off Win 10 machines, but we couldn't do Win 10 Enterprise multi-session because it was interesting. The device client couldn't determine whether it was a server or a desktop, and so it just really needed to be updated, because in one method you saw one, and in the other you saw it as a server. So now that's resolved, and as you can see, moving to a public preview. And public preview means it's available for everybody, and it generally means there probably won't be any major changes to it before it goes GA, but the product group always, kind of puts that out as the last test before it does go GA.
I wonder, as you are out there talking to newer people that are in the server-based computing world, they're growing up in a world where Windows 10 multi-session is just normal, whereas for the rest of us, it's revolutionary. And watching products evolve to try to understand and support that it's going to be interesting and fun.
So I have kind of a dumb question here. I'm curious, Rob. With Microsoft Endpoint Manager, if you're managing a Windows 10 Enterprise multi-session host, does that need to be a persistent host?
So it was originally, right? So and in the case that was what we were able to do pretty easily, right? It kind of makes sense that hey, I've got that one-to-one relationship. Jim Bob gets this app set, and push and go. And when it was multi-session, it was a little bit different. So the past guidance that we were giving folks that wanted to do even System Center or Intune for multi-session was, make the changes to the base image, and then push those back out. Now you'll be able to do kind of the same thing. You could do it when it's running and push those changes, or you could push those changes to the image via Endpoint Manager, to get those updates in. That'll be more streamlined and more consistent, I suppose.
Yeah. Okay. That's what I was getting. That's what I was wondering.
Yeah. It kind of, when you think about it, it kind of doesn't make sense, except for you're doing more of a deployment per user. I can see where, there might be some future enhancements where app attach where that's a per user assignment could be interesting, pushed over to a multi-session environment. Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good question. And one we get, a lot of confusion around.
All right. This next one talks about, I spent some time on a project last week and just the evolution of what FS Logics has brought to the end user compute world, the virtual end user compute world specifically. It's just awesome to hear people talk about how it's changed the way they approach it. What is this FS Logics agent public preview referring to, Rob?
Yeah. So one thing that happened recently for the FS Logics team is we got a new product manager, Steve Downs, great guy, been at Microsoft a number of years, also a former Citrix, I think product group guy as well. But in this case, so I guess one of his first, it is the first ship release for him. And in this public preview, one of the key things that I think is pretty neat is the ability to make changes to the disk size, which you've always been able to change the max disk size, but in this case it is retroactive. I haven't tested this, but it's supposed to actually inflate the size for you via script. So before you would go make a max disk size, and if somebody was above it, it actually wouldn't change it out there. Mm-hmm. So in this case, as long as they haven't really exceeded that, it's going to change that on existing disks.
Okay. Bill, have you guys run into that issue?
Oh yeah, several times. Yes. So this will be a much needed, much desired feature.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Rob, May 2021 updates for Teams for Azure Virtual Desktop. Let me just make sure I understand. Teams in an Azure Virtual Desktop. Is there, as long as do you have to have Teams installed on both ends in the virtual desktop as well as the endpoint for that to work?
Correct. So the virtual machine has to have the right version of Teams installed, as well as the endpoint you're connecting from. And at this point, all of the what we're talking about is mostly around peer-to-peer, right? I'm going to, as a client in the VM, I'm going to sense the agent that's running on the desktop, and I'm going to redirect capabilities to the endpoint, right? So those today are still all exclusively Windows, right? They need to be Windows 10, and the Teams version needs to be up to date. We envision that should be able to port across other OSs in the future. I think Mac is one of the first ones that we've had a lot of requests for.
Mm-hmm. Well, I obviously the guys at iGel are doing that as well.
They are.
That they took that on their own to make that work in conjunction with what you guys made available on your side, right?
Exactly. And I think as we put enhancements from the Teams team, those become available to other folks, because some of those enhancements really could only come out of that group. I think certainly Microsoft, VMware and the Citrix as well, same type of enhancements. And the thing about Teams is we may continue to see a lot of drips of updates, really, if you will, because you think about Teams and it's collaboration, it's audio, video, there's just a lot of different pieces. So, we'll continue to see that because there's different elements, right?
Yeah. Teams is definitely a platform you guys are going to continue to do more with, and our EUC virtual desktop world is going to have to keep up.
Yeah.
Okay, next section talks about Azure portal deployment updates. You can go as deep into this or as little as you want, but obviously understanding and working within the Azure ecosystem is a big part of being able to do Azure virtual desktops. Yeah.
And since AVD has been able to have a native Azure portal, if anybody who's worked in Azure has seen, little nuances and changes as, different enhancements happen. no change from the AVD perspective in that those enhancements are going to hit us as well. I think one of the key things that was new for us was the ability to kind of deploy Gen 2 VMs. Out. A lot of times we're not seeing visibility into what's coming is right. So, we're going to continue to see additional management from MSIX app attach type features and resources. So I think we'll continue to see those kind of things.
Right. Bill, any thoughts on any of these things? You guys are probably seeing them in your projects.
No, I don't have any questions about these. We are seeing some of this. The MSIX stuff is really interesting to see that move forward.
Yeah. Okay. Next one here is single sign-on using Active Directory Federation services public preview. I guess I would have thought this was probably already there, and maybe I'm just misunderstanding what this is.
Yeah, a nice little jab there. It was funny. In what we used to call the fall release before the spring release of AVD, we had that ability. So ADFS sync worked. When we ported over to the portal management style, kind of away from more of the template or command line or PowerShell environment, that piece actually did get broken in that transition. It was foreseen. It was a little bit of a hiccup. So we've had a private preview running for a couple of months with folks, testing. Those that already have ADFS, this is a nice methodology to get SSO. For folks that don't have ADFS, I don't know that I wouldn't now change my direction to implement ADFS when, at least not for AVD. AVD is going to have support for some other mechanisms where you wouldn't probably, rely on ADFS.
So are most people using like Azure Active Directory with AD Sync or just Azure AD?
Yeah, exactly. So today we do all the authentication with Azure Virtual Desktop. We do that with Azure AD, yet the VMs and the profile containers all talk to native Active Directory. Mm-hmm. So where we're headed, and really the issue is that the SSO today can't really pass through because of the VM is in effectively a different domain. So now that in the future, not now, but in the future, we'll be able to do Azure Active Directory domain join as well as the FS Logix containers to be able to authenticate.
And that's kind of the nirvana, right? We all get to Active Directory as a complete service, and then whatever service we need to interact with that can do so 100% natively.
Yeah, and we see a lot of folks very high security environments. They're really hesitant to place Active Directory anywhere but in their own premises. So being able to rely on Azure Active Directory makes a lot of sense. Additionally, it reduces maybe some of those on-prem resources, so I don't have to send the authentication request to go back on-prem, and I also don't have to build out on Azure Active Directory or even use Azure Active Directory services. So it's a nice thing that a lot of folks have been looking forward to.
Yeah. So, Bill, I know this has been a topic, whether it was AVD or Windows 10 multi-session enterprise. Any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I think, Rob, this is kind of solves that issue that we see when we build out a new environment and the user has got the web client or the RD web, the RD client, and they go to log into that and they see their desktops and they click the desktop and then they have to authenticate a second time. This will effectively eliminate that process, that step.
Correct.
I looked into this one a little bit, and it looks like if you have ADFS, this is probably a slam dunk. If you don't, then it's a little bit more involved. You got to have a CA and some other things that most people will have.
Yeah.
But obviously, Azure AD DS directory services don't support enterprise CAs, so You kind of be in we ran into that with a customer, not with AVD, but with Citrix, trying to use their federated authentication process. They had ADDS, and we needed a full-blown enterprise CA for that. So we had to do some switching of things around. But that's one of the challenges, I think, with this concept. But it definitely is it's going to be something people are really going to look at hard, because it gets rid of that second prompt.
Yeah.
Okay. Next one, enterprise scale support. I know the ability to scale obviously is very cloud type terminology and conversations, whether you're talking, again, AVD or Windows 10 multi-session enterprise in Azure, AVD 2.0 or AVD option B, I guess we'll call it. What is this talking about, Rob?
So really what this is the cloud adoption framework, or I think we call it CAF for short. A lot of times there's a lot of tools and mechanisms for being able to adopt and migrate to Azure. And it's just really doing kind of, I'd almost call it like a second wave of CAF support that AVD is providing today. So, you're able to do, migration analysis and be able to, to follow enterprise methodologies for shifting to Azure with your Windows Virtual Desktop, Azure Virtual Desktop environment.
Yeah. Okay. And then finally, customer adoption kit.
Yeah. I think I've not seen it called the customer adoption kit. I think I've also seen it called kind of the kind of quick start is I think what we were seeing it as. But it's an ability to kind of have a tool set to be able to quickly adopt and understand and get kind of a minimum viable product up, of testing AVD, right? To kind of simplify that methodology.
And what's the key component? Is it just is it scripting? Is it UI driven? Is it a simple Azure tenant that just folds into what you're trying to do? What's the main thing that makes it quicker?
I would say first, clear documentation along with scripting. Yep.
Okay. So, Bill, do you think for our POCs and pilots, this is something we might be able to take advantage of?
Yeah, I actually pulled this down earlier today. I don't know if I saw it in this article or got an email about it, and it looks like, at least the parts that I looked at, it's like the one of them I'm looking at right now says Windows Virtual Desktop User Guide, and this is about helping the end user understand what they're doing and how to access it, and how to get it set up on a various devices. So it's definitely something I think we would start leveraging if we have when we have customers leveraging AVD, is because this is really all about helping the end user get into the environment. So it helps drive adoption. So yeah, I think we'll be using it.
Well, guys, that's the end of the May updates that are released here. Rob, any other ones that maybe aren't here or things that are coming that you would want to highlight?
I think the one that we're really excited about, I think for one is that being able to have the Azure Active Directory domain joined devices, continually improving client devices as well. So, you can, see, those by each individual client, some of the enhancements. And, you think about, the RDP of the past, it's a lot different since we're not really releasing a new OS or with new, major service releases for the OS. I mean, these updates, as you'll see for clients, these could come out as often as every 2 weeks.
Yeah. Well,
so those features can follow, kind of their own path as needed.
Yeah. Well, that's what happens, right? When you move it to a service and you're not relying on legacy change control and people, right, that are doing more than just that job to get it done.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, Rob, I appreciate you joining us. I know it's late. It's almost 6 o'clock here on the East Coast. As always, thanks for taking a little time each month to help us walk through what's evolving over there at Microsoft regarding this AVD product. I think if nothing else, we helped each other kind of change our. We enforced the idea that we got to start calling it AVD. Maybe this is. I know it's going to help me because referring back to this conversation and forcing myself not to call it, the other thing.
The other thing, exactly. It's my pleasure and good talking with you guys.
Yeah, thanks, Rob.
All right, guys. Thanks. Have a good rest of your Monday.
Thanks.